For millions of years, life on Earth has been in constant motion, an endless cycle of birth, adaptation, and extinction. From microscopic organisms to the towering dinosaurs and massive mammals that once roamed the planet, evolution has shaped the fate of every living creature. However, time is an unforgiving force, and many of these ancient beings have long since vanished, leaving behind fossils as their only testimony. Their disappearance made way for a new species, one that would rise to dominate the Earth, the most intelligent creature to ever exist: humans. But this dominance was not instant. The journey from primitive primates to modern Homo sapiens was a long and grueling one, filled with challenges, adaptation, and transformation. Our ancestors were once nothing more than tree-dwelling creatures, quietly existing in the dense forests, unaware of the incredible future awaiting them. How did they evolve from simple primates to the rulers of the world? What circumstances pushed them to leave the safety of the trees and stand on two legs? To truly understand our origins, we must travel millions of years back in time, to an era where our ancestors were not yet human, when they were simply survivors in a world full of giants. Over 20 million years ago, the world was vastly different from what we know today. Dense forests covered much of the land, and towering trees provided shelter for countless species. Among them were our distant ancestors, small, nimble primates who lived high above the ground. These early primates belonged to a group called proconsul, often referred to as the silent warriors of evolution. Unlike modern monkeys, they lacked tails, but their strong limbs made them excellent climbers. Life in the treetops was not just a preference, it was a necessity. The ground was home to deadly predators, from giant snakes to early species of big cats. To avoid danger, our ancestors developed aerial agility, leaping from branch to branch with ease. Their diet mainly consisted of fruits, leaves, and occasionally insects, which provided them with the nutrients necessary for survival. At this stage, they were still quadrupedal, meaning they moved on all fours. Their arms and legs were of similar length, and their hands and feet were almost identical in shape. However, one significant change had already begun: the brain. While still small and primitive, it was slightly larger than that of other mammals of the same size. Their teeth were also evolving, becoming less sharp and more suited for chewing softer foods, indicating an early shift towards logical problem-solving over brute force. Though these early primates were still far from human, the foundation for something greater had been set. Little did they know, dramatic environmental changes were about to force them into a completely new way of life, one that would push them toward becoming the first upright walkers in history. Around 10 million years ago, a major transformation began to reshape the world. The climate cooled, causing forests to shrink and giving way to vast open grasslands. The once dense canopies that provided safety for our ancestors started to disappear, leaving them with fewer places to hide. Suddenly, the treetop sanctuary that had protected them for millions of years was no longer an option. This environmental shift forced them to make a life-changing decision: adapt or perish. With fewer trees, moving efficiently on the ground became a necessity. This is when a new species emerged, the first apes that could walk upright. These early ancestors, known as Australopithecus, developed longer legs and a more flexible hip structure, allowing them to walk on 2 feet while still being able to climb when necessary. But why did walking upright become such a critical adaptation? The answer lies in survival advantages. By standing on 2 legs, these early humans could see farther across the grasslands, spotting predators or food sources before it was too late. Free their hands, allowing them to carry food, hold tools, or even protect themselves. Use energy more efficiently, as bipedal walking required less effort over long distances compared to moving on all fours. Although they were still primitive, their ability to move both on the ground and in trees gave them an edge over other species. They were no longer just creatures of the forest, they had become explorers of a new world. However, this transition was not without its dangers. Moving through open grasslands exposed them to new predators, such as early big cats and massive prehistoric hyenas. Without sharp claws or powerful fangs, their survival depended on something else: intelligence and cooperation. This period marked the beginning of something extraordinary. An era where early humans were no longer just reacting to nature, but instead starting to shape their own destiny. Around 4 million years ago, the world witnessed the rise of a new kind of primate, one that looked even more human-like than before. This was Australopithecus, the closest ancestor to modern humans at the time. Unlike their predecessors, they had fully adapted to walking upright. Their bodies were built for life on the ground, yet they still carried the legacy of their tree-dwelling past, with long arms and curved fingers that allowed them to climb when necessary. These early hominins were true survivors of the African savanna, where life was harsh and unpredictable. The once lush forests had almost disappeared, replaced by vast plains, scattered trees, and dry grasslands. With fewer resources available, Australopithecus had to become more resourceful. They could no longer rely solely on fruits. Instead, they began incorporating roots, tubers, and even scavenged meat into their diet. This shift in eating habits helped fuel the growth of their brains, laying the groundwork for future intelligence. But intelligence alone wasn't enough to survive. Social bonds became essential. They formed tight-knit groups, working together to gather food, protect one another, and even care for their young. One of their most notable behaviors was grooming, where they would pick dirt and parasites off each other. While it may have seemed like just a hygiene practice, it was actually a powerful bonding ritual that strengthened trust and cooperation within their groups. Even though their brains were still much smaller than ours today, they were beginning to think differently. They could recognize danger, plan for the future, and possibly even communicate using early forms of gestures or vocal sounds. Australopithecus was no longer just another species trying to survive. They were taking the first real steps toward becoming human. Little did they know, their descendants would soon change the world forever. Around 2.5 million years ago, a remarkable shift took place, one that would set the course for human dominance over the natural world. A new species emerged, more intelligent and more capable than any before them, Homo habilis, or the handyman. This was the first of our ancestors to create and use tools, marking a revolutionary moment in history. Unlike their predecessors, Homo habilis had larger brains and more dexterous hands, allowing them to craft simple tools from stones. These were not just random rocks. They were carefully shaped and sharpened to help with cutting meat, breaking bones for marrow, and even self-defense. This breakthrough gave them a crucial advantage: access to richer sources of food, particularly animal protein, which further fueled brain growth. But the use of tools was only part of their survival strategy. Homo habilis developed more advanced social structures, living in small groups where cooperation was essential. They likely had a rudimentary form of communication, using gestures and primitive sounds to share information about food sources or warn of approaching predators. This was the early foundation of what would one day become language. Their daily lives were filled with challenges. With no sharp claws, strong fangs, or powerful speed, they relied on their wits to avoid becoming prey. The African savanna was still ruled by ferocious big cats and massive prehistoric hyenas, so working together became a matter of life and death. One of the most intriguing behaviors of Homo habilis was scavenging. Instead of hunting, they often followed predators and waited for them to leave scraps of meat behind. This might seem like a dangerous and desperate tactic, but it was incredibly effective. Over time, they became more daring, working together to chase away smaller predators and claim the best cuts of meat. This was the first real glimpse of what would make humans unique: the ability to shape their environment rather than be shaped by it. With tools in hand and minds growing sharper, our ancestors were preparing for the next great leap in evolution. About 1.9 million years ago, a new species emerged that would take human evolution to the next level: Homo erectus, the upright man. Unlike their predecessors, these early humans were taller, stronger, and more intelligent. But their most defining feature wasn't just their appearance, it was their ability to hunt and control fire. Homo erectus was no longer just a scavenger waiting for predators to leave scraps behind. They became hunters, developing new techniques to track, chase, and take down animals. Their bodies evolved for endurance. They could run long distances without tiring, a crucial advantage in an environment where prey was fast but would eventually become exhausted. This method, known as persistence hunting, allowed them to outlast their prey rather than outrun it. Their tool-making skills also became more sophisticated. The simple stone flakes of Homo habilis evolved into hand axes, multi-purpose tools used for cutting, digging, and even crafting other objects. These advancements showed that Homo erectus wasn't just reacting to their surroundings, they were actively shaping their world. But perhaps the most groundbreaking development was the control of fire. The ability to harness fire changed everything. Fire provided warmth, allowing Homo erectus to survive in colder climates. It offered protection, keeping dangerous predators at bay. Cooking food became possible, making meat easier to digest and unlocking more nutrients, fueling further brain growth. With fire, hunting, and better tools, Homo erectus became the first human species to expand beyond Africa. They migrated across vast distances, reaching parts of Asia and Europe, marking the beginning of humans as a global species. This period in history was a turning point. Humans were no longer just surviving, they were thriving. And with every step forward, they moved closer to becoming what we now recognize as modern humans. Around 300,000 years ago, evolution reached a crucial milestone. Homo sapiens, or the wise man, appeared. These were not just another species of early humans. They were the most intelligent, adaptable, and innovative beings the world had ever seen. Physically, Homo sapiens were leaner and more agile than Homo erectus, but their true advantage lay in their brains. Their skulls housed larger and more complex brains, capable of advanced problem-solving, critical thinking, and creativity. This intelligence allowed them to invent better tools, develop sophisticated communication, and work together in ways never seen before. One of the most striking differences between Homo sapiens and their predecessors was their use of symbolic thought and culture. Unlike earlier humans, they painted on cave walls, carved figures from bones and stones, and even buried their dead with rituals. These behaviors suggest they had a sense of identity, spirituality, and even early forms of storytelling, something no other species had fully achieved. Their ability to cooperate on a massive scale set them apart. They didn't just live in small groups. They formed larger communities, sharing knowledge, resources, and survival strategies. This cooperation allowed them to hunt larger animals, defend against predators, and adapt to various environments. With these advantages, Homo sapiens spread beyond Africa, reaching Europe, Asia, and even Australia. Their intelligence allowed them to develop new hunting techniques, craft better weapons, and eventually domesticate plants and animals, setting the stage for the first human civilizations. But it wasn't just intelligence that made Homo sapiens so successful. It was their ability to imagine, create, and dream of things beyond survival. This was the spark that would eventually lead to language, art, technology, and the birth of modern society. With each passing generation, Homo sapiens inched closer to becoming the dominant species on Earth. But their journey was far from over. New challenges, discoveries, and transformations awaited them in the millennia to come.